As we go from Shabbos Parshas Shmos to Shabbos Parshas Va'era, both the beginning of Sefer Shmos, which is the Sefer that talks about the first redemption of the Jewish people from Mitzrayim, which is the preparation for the final Gula. When Kimei Tzeis Yeretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflois, Hashem will show us wonders in the same way as when we left Mitzrayim. It's appropriate for us to learn a Sicha that the Rebbe gave out for Shabbos Parshas Shmos Tafshin Nun Aleph. The shir will be L'schus Refuah Shalema for Akiva Gershon ben Rachel Basya. Before we look at the actual Sicha, the Sicha, as everyone knows, is a Sicha that talks about Bitachon, the power of faith and trust in Hashem. First, let's give a little bit of an overview of what happened around the time that the Sicha came out. As we know, for every Shabbos, the Rebbe would edit a likut, and the likut consisted of a Sicha that had been said in a previous year, and that the Rebbe edited it for a specific Shabbos. At that time, it was Tafshin Nun Aleph 5751. After 6 months of the world being in a state of fear from the threats of the madman Saddam Hussein, who threatened Chas v'Shalom to destroy or to bring a lot of damage on the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. This was the 2 weeks that were leading up to the deadline that the coalition forces headed by the United States Army gave in the ultimatum to Saddam Hussein that he has to back out of Kuwait, otherwise they'll start a war. And the outcome of the war was the fear of what would happen in Eretz Yisrael. The entire time, there was one voice that was announcing and proclaiming clearly for all to hear, publicized in newspapers everywhere in the world, that there's nothing to be afraid of. Eretz Yisrael is the safest place in the world. Everyone can go to Eretz Yisrael and there's totally nothing to fear. And that was the one voice of the Rebbe who pointed to the Nevuah of the Yalkut Shemaini, where when there's wars in that region of the world and the whole world is afraid and the Jewish people are afraid, Hashem says to the Jewish people, "My children, do not fear all that I've done only for your sake. The time of your redemption has arrived." The Rebbe spoke about that medrash and about the general concept again and again, clearly stating there's nothing to be afraid of. The 2 weeks right before the end of this ultimatum, which was January 15th, which was Tuesday, Parshas Boy, the likut of Shabbos Parshas Shmos and the likut of Shabbos Parshas Va'era, gave a clear indication, besides for all the sichas and farbrengens that the Rebbe was speaking at that time, a clear indication from those weeks exactly how to prepare for what was to come. There was the likut of Shabbos Parshas Shmos, which spoke about bitachon, trust in Hashem, in a way of tracht good, v'zayin good, think good and it will be good, and where the Rebbe deals with a very basic question. And that is, how can one trust in Hashem and be certain without the shadow of a doubt that it will be good? Maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm not worthy of it. And that's what the Rebbe discusses in this likut, in this sicha, the 100% assuredness that for sure it will be good. In the sicha of Shabbos Parshas Va'era, the Rebbe goes on to discuss even more on a more global scale, the Haftarah of Parshas Va'era, where the Navi Yecheskel is told by Hashem to prophesize about the wars that will take place between the two great nations at that time, between Mitzrayim and Bavel, Egypt and Babylon. And Hashem says to the Navi, V'lecha etein pischain peh b'seicham. Hashem says to the Navi, I'm going to help and save the Jewish people, and for you I will give an opening which means a pischon peh, something to show your truth, something to show the reality and the truth of the words that you're saying. And the Rebbe explains at length, but an amazing point, and that is that everything that happens in the world happens for the sake of the Jewish people. And here Hashem brought about a war of two great armies for one single purpose. Although most Jews already believed in the nevuos and the prophecies that Yecheskel HaNavi was speaking about salvation, about Geula, about redemption, and nevertheless there were a handful of Jews that still didn't believe Yecheskel's prophecies. And Hashem said, I'm going to make this whole big thing happen so that those who don't yet see it will be able to see it. And again over here the Rebbe points to the Medrash, Banai al tisyaru kol ma she'asisi lo yasisi elo b'shvilchem igi hazman gulaschem, that the entire war and the entire threat is only so that Jews should realize and recognize and believe in the prophecy that igi hazman gulaschem, the time of your redemption has arrived. So sometimes big things happen in the world just in order to strengthen our emunah and to strengthen our faith. And this was at a time, what followed then, that week at the beginning of the war, when everyone was afraid. When the missiles began to hit Eretz Yisrael, and especially in the beginning when the news stations reported all types of lies and things that weren't true, just to bring fear, chas v'shalom, amongst Jews. And the faith and the strong faith that no matter what was something that we were given with these sichas, with these clear words of the Rebbe. Now let's look at the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Shmos, and especially with its basic question, both on a personal level for every person and on a global level. How do we know that we deserve it? How can we be 100% sure? And so the Rebbe talks about Moshe Rabbeinu in this week's Parsha, that the Torah says, Vayira Moshe was afraid. After the story that Moshe killed the Mitzri, he killed the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. And later on Moshe Rabbeinu sees two Jewish people fighting, and he tells them off for fighting, and they turn to him and they say, well, you also kill me just like you killed the Egyptian. And it says Moshe was afraid, and he said, Achin, behold, noida hadavar, it's already been known. And Rashi gives two explanations to this. The first explanation is a simple one. Moshe was afraid. He was afraid because he realized that here these people, Dasan and Aviram, will go and tell Parai that he had killed the Egyptian. Then Rashi says another explanation. Moshe was afraid, perhaps if there are informers amongst the Jewish people, maybe they're not worthy of being redeemed. And he said, Achi noida davar, now it's been known to me the question that I had, what did the Jews do more than all the other nations to deserve such terrible slavery and terrible suffering? And the question is, Rashi always gives the simple meaning of the pasuk. What's wrong with the simple meaning of the pasuk, that we have to take the pasuk out of its simple meaning to go to an explanation which has a lot of questions? Why would Moshe doubt if the redemption will come? Why would Moshe have a question? It's all in Brisbane, Abisarim, etc., etc. Why would Rashi say this and have to change also the meaning of the pasuk Achi Noida Davar? There must have been a question that Rashi had in the simple meaning of the pasuk, which forced him to say a second explanation as well. And the Rebbe explains that the question is a simple one. When the Torah tells us something, the Torah is telling us in the simple sense something which is relevant to the story. The fight of Dasan and Aviram and Moshe telling them off is something that's relevant to the story, because otherwise, how did Parai find out? The Torah wants to tell us Parai found out what happened, and that's why Moshe ran away and he ran to Midian. But the question is, what does Moshe Rabbeinu's fear, why is that relevant to the story? He didn't do anything. It's not like he ran away because he was afraid. He only ran away later once Parai heard. So what's the difference that Moshe was afraid? Why is that relevant to the story? And that's why Rashi explains that according to the second explanation, that Moshe Rabbeinu's fear is a totally, completely different concept, something to do with the general idea of the Geula. However, the Rebbe says it must be that the simple meaning of the pasuk, the fear of Moshe, also there's a reason and there's a relevance to Moshe Rabbeinu's fear. And the Rebbe goes on at length to explain the medrash that says that there were two people who Hashem gave them a direct promise, and yet they were still afraid. The chosen of the Avos, of the patriarchs, and the chosen of the Nevi'im, of the prophets. The chosen of the Avos was Yaakov. Hashem said to him, Hine anochi imach, behold, I will be with you. And yet, Vayira Yaakov was afraid. The chosen of the Nevi'im was Moshe Rabbeinu, whom Hashem also told him, Anochi imach, I will be together with you, I will be with you. And then he was afraid of Og. Hashem had to tell him, don't fear Og, which means he was afraid. Why were they afraid? There's two explanations in the commentaries of the Medrash. Some say this is a positive thing, and the lesson that we learn from them is a positive thing, that no matter what, no matter, even if Hashem himself promises you something, you always have to be afraid, maybe I'm not worthy, maybe I'm not deserving of it because I did something wrong. Always be afraid in your actions that maybe they're not owning up to be able to deserve the promise of Hashem. The second explanation is no. The fear that they had, the reason why the Medrash is telling this is to teach us that we shouldn't be afraid. And the truth is, in the simple meaning, in the pasuk in Yeshaya Navi says to the Jewish people, "Vatishkach es Hashem oisecha v'tefachi tamid kol hayom." You forgot Hashem who created you, and you were always afraid. Which means fear shows on the fact that a person forgets about Hashem. But the question is, I can understand in the first thing that it's telling us we should be afraid that maybe our actions aren't up to par. But in the second meaning, that it's telling us that we shouldn't be afraid, how could it be? Why wouldn't a person be afraid if even Moshe and Yaakov were directly promised by Hashem, and they who didn't sin, they were afraid, perhaps I sinned? What about us, who for sure we know that Adam in Tzaddik Ba'aretz? We know that we're not worthy of it. So how can we be certain that we'll be deserving of getting of Hashem's kindness? So one explanation, and the truth is this question is not only on the Medrash, it's on the general mitzvah of bitachon. There's a mitzvah of bitachon to trust in Hashem, which according to the Rambam is a positive mitzvah in the Torah, that it says when you go out to war, don't be afraid. And the Rambam says whenever something comes towards you, don't fear it. Have trust in Hashem. We have a mitzvah to have trust in Hashem. Why would we have trust in Hashem? Of course we trust that Hashem can help us. But why would we be certain that Hashem will help us when we know that Adam in Tzaddik Ba'aretz, we probably did something that we're not worthy of Hashem's kindness? One way that we can explain this is that bitachon actually means, like the Chayva Salvavis says, that a person should be certain, a person should be calm. He knows the strength and the greatness of the one whom he trusts in, and therefore he's calm. We can explain that the calmness doesn't come from the fact that I know for sure that everything will be good, but the calm comes from the fact that I know that Hashem runs the world. And so either way it's good. If I deserve a miracle, then it doesn't matter how impossible it seems, Hashem is all powerful, Hashem will make the miracle for me. And if I don't deserve it, because I deserve some type of punishment, then I should also not be afraid. I should be calm, because if it's Hashem giving it to me, that means it's obviously for my good, because punishments are also for a person's good. So if I'll get it, that means it's ultimately going to be for my ultimate good. And what about Moshe and Yaakov, according to the opinion that says that it's not a good thing that they were afraid? It's because the simple meaning is that they were afraid of Esav, or afraid of Og. And that's what a person should learn not to be afraid of. Don't fear the circumstance, fear only Hashem. And if Hashem decides that this is what should happen, then there's no problem. But the truth is that if we look at the mitzvah of bitachon, we see in the simple sense that bitachon means a total calm and trust that Hashem will help. And according to this, the only one who can have a full bitachon is someone who knows he's a 100% complete tzaddik, and he's for sure deserving of it. And like we see in the Chayvas Alvavis that he talks about bitachon, and he says that the person realizes that the one whom we have faith in, he'll do good for anyone, whether you're deserving it or not, because he's the ultimate master of kindness as well. So the question is, how can we have faith? It's true, Hashem is the ultimate kind one, but perhaps the kindness is that what should happen to me should be something that's not good in the open and revealed good. And so the Rebbe explains in the following manner. The Rebbe says, let's take a look at the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, which the previous Rebbe quoted many times. And in fact, it's interesting that when the previous Rebbe said it, one of the times, someone wrote to the previous Rebbe about a person who was extremely ill. And the Rebbe said to him, I want to tell you a story of 3 generations. Someone wrote to my father about someone who was extremely ill. And he told how someone had written to his father and asked for a bracha for someone who was extremely ill. And he told how someone had written to his father, since the Rebbe Rashab wrote about the Rebbe Marash about the Tzemach Tzedek. And when the Chassid came to the Tzemach Tzedek, asking for a bracha for someone who's extremely ill, that he should pray for him, and the Tzemach Tzedek said, why are you asking me? Ask yourself. Think good, it will be good. The Chassid turned to the Tzemach Tzedek and he said, what does my thinking help? I'm a simple person. If the Rebbe thinks it will help, in other words, the Rebbe's thoughts will definitely change things. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, no. Thought makes a difference. Thought affects the reality. And when you think good, you'll make that it should be good. And in fact, the Rebbe connects this also to another story. A story of the Tzemach Tzedek, who heard from his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe told the Tzemach Tzedek what he had heard from his teacher, the Maggid, when he was worried about health. And he said to him, he quoted to him the words of the Zohar, that whatever happens up above is a mirror image of what a person does down here. When a person is in a happy state of mind, when a person is in a state of mind, an open and a joyous, shining face, then from above they also shine upon him and give him an open and revealed good. Think good, he told him, and it will be good. So the Rebbe asked, but why? True, I can think good if I know I deserve it. But if I might not deserve it, how can I be 100% positive it will be good? And so the Rebbe here explains the meaning of the mitzvah of bitachon. It's not only an outcome of emunah. It's not only a derivative of the fact that since I believe that Hashem is all-powerful, therefore I know He can do whatever He wants, whatever can, even if in the natural way there's no way that it should happen. And therefore I trust that Hashem can help me. There's something else. There's a mitzvah, a specific mitzvah of bitachon. Bitachon means a person should work on themselves and cause themselves to realize that I am 100% in the hands of Hashem, and therefore there's nothing in the world that will stop Him from helping me, and to trust beyond the shadow of the doubt that Hashem will help me. And like the famous explanation of the Baal Shem Tov, that bitachon doesn't mean someone who's in a deep drowning in the ocean, and as the saying goes, that a drowning person will grab onto any straw. Now a straw that's floating in the ocean, there's no way that it can save the drowning person, and yet the Baal Shem Tov says that's not called bitachon, that's called tikva, hope. Even if the hope is in something that makes no sense, but you're hoping for something to help you. Bitachon means when there is no straw, but the person knows beyond the shadow of a doubt to the extent that he's happy and he's able to walk around with a smile on his face because he realizes that Hashem definitely will help me, and he already now is going around with the feeling that he's been helped. And the Rebbe says when a person works on that and puts himself in that type of state of tracht gut, of thinking good, then the reward for that, not that even if the person is not deserving of it, because we know that one of the foundations of our faith is reward and punishment. But here it's a reward. It's an outcome and a reward for the avodah that a person did to make himself trust, that once you make yourself trust, you can be certain that even if you didn't deserve it up until now you're going to get the open and revealed good. And that's the meaning of bitach b'Hashem. When a person throws his entire package, he throws everything of his onto Hashem, he puts it all on Hashem, then Hashem, as a reward for that, as an outcome of that, as a consequence of that, Hashem will make that it will be good. The same thing is also in the opposite sense. If a person doesn't believe, or a person starts thinking negative thoughts, the Gemara says in Brachas, a person sighed, and he was told, you want to bring suffering upon yourself. By sighing, you're bringing suffering upon yourself. Same thing over here with Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah is teaching us a lesson. And regardless of why Moshe Rabbeinu himself had his reasons for what he did, but the Torah is telling us about Moshe Rabbeinu's fear to say, if you're not afraid, even though in the natural world this is what seems like the only thing that could happen, it won't happen. If Moshe hadn't been afraid, Paro wouldn't heard about it, or even if he heard about it, he wouldn't try to kill Moshe. It was only because of Moshe's fear, and not only he was afraid, but Vayomer, he said, he spoke, he gave an expression to that fear. That's why Paro was tried to kill him. But had that not happened, it never would have happened. And the same thing is obviously in the opposite. And this is the special lesson that we learn from this. That when a person goes, and a person is going in the way of Hashem, and going in the way of doing what he's supposed to do. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, who went and he protected a fellow Jew, he went and he told off people who were doing what was wrong. Then a person knows, even if there seems to be obstacles in the way, by thinking good, it totally depends on the person. When I think good, and when I have trust and faith that it will be good, then it will actually be good in the open and revealed good. That's both in a person's private life, and specifically when it comes to the ultimate geula, which we're all awaiting. The Chidah says, "B'schar hakivui kedai shetigolenu." In the merit of the hope and the trust in Hashem, when we know and we have faith beyond the shadow of a doubt, especially since we were promised and shown that Kroiva Yeshua Silavai, the salvation is about to come, then definitely that itself is a reason why Svitzangut, the complete and full redemption will come immediately.